If I would interview you tomorrow and I would see this persona, I would grill you a lot, and like in the best of ways, because I would be like, how are you actually gonna use it? How are you actually gonna use it, whether passive or active? And if you wouldn't answer it, I would know that you just created that so it looks good. Are you able to review my first ever case study? Just finished it. Hell yeah. Hey, what is up? Welcome back, Design Squad, and today I have another UX portfolio to review. I presume is a junior UX designer because it's a first ever case study for UX from him. And the prognosis is a specialist advice, affordable price, very simple tagline. He tells about the content, so I'm prepared as a hiring manager, I guess, project overview, design thinking, emphasize, define, ideate, prototype, test, the style guide, and final design. And this is where I'm gonna be a bit very immediately, because design thinking is not really UX. It could be an additional activity, and seeing that he did empathy, definition, ideation, prototype, test sort of aligns with a typical UX approach, but let's see exactly what activities he did before making that judgment call. I think the UI looks very clean, not gonna dig deeper into that. We care about the structure, the story he tells, and the actual gaps he fills in with those different assets he attaches to it. UX designer, and he spent a few months. I wonder if it was part of a bootcamp or is it self-directed. Could actually list it out so we know if it's a conceptual case or not for hiring managers, so it's going to be very important to know. Jumping into the actual meat of the case study, as you can see, there is a background where he describes exactly what the aim is, the goal, and a problem statement. And a problem statement is very user focused. I guess this is a new thing, and again, it would tie in. I would need to know if it's a side project, a conceptual case you worked on your own, or is it that you actually worked as part of a team. And I think it is a conceptual case so far, just from the look of it. As you can see, the goal is to create simple and well-designed app that puts user directly in touch with a medical specialist. But this is where the problem statement would really need to start with a business, and you might want to be specific that there is nothing like that, and this is the new initiative. Maybe it's a startup thing, but you need to kind of start with something like the bottom line. And so you are basically covering the design thinking process, and design thinking again is not really UX process. Some of it could be workshops introduced by IDEO and the material to introduce the human centricity in a typical approach so that innovation is meaningful. So that's why you have empathy, let's say, because you start with the human needs, and sort of it aligns with the user experience in a bit, but I would be very careful, do one or the other. You might want to see if simple UX process would be better here. Then you do empathy exercise, you do an UX analysis of the existing apps, I guess, of a competitor landscape. So you might want to think if just two methods are actually enough to cover that background research. I would think there is more if you can actually explore those on why the existing patients are actually using that. So digging deeper, and I can see that you proceed with the user research where you outline exactly who the users are. You did some interviews, you did some surveys. I guess the sequence is questionable, like why surveys were after the interviews, or is it just a presentation? Because you would naturally want to start with the attitudes and the numbers, the quant basically, which you could achieve with a surveys to identify the areas to target, or like a very high level themes and insights. And then you could say, okay, now I'm forming my hypotheses, and that's why I need to talk to the specific audience, specific users, to understand it deeper and the whys. While the thinking is important, I wouldn't really list out the questions. I would list out the answers or the themes or the insights you got on a kind of high level. And this is where I guess your analysis comes in, where you're basically cohorting different bits, pain points, quotes. There's a lot of different activities you could do with the research or as part of the research, running a discovery to understand if there's even an opportunity to introduce a new app. Because I would bet that people don't need new apps. We need better ways to do things. But what are those things? That's exactly what you are after, to outline it. Because if you think about it, the app is really one of the ideas you had in the end. It shouldn't have been a starter. And even if a business would come to you and say, hey, I want the app for GP appointments, you would still want to understand where does that app fit in, or is it should be an app, or should it be accompanied by a printout, or a service design touch points around it. Maybe it's a customer experience where you also have emails and other touch points. Just thinking more holistically. Going by design thinking approach, you're trying to define the personas. A lot of information here just from the outlook, I would question how are you gonna use it. This is a pitfall for a lot of junior designers and even experienced designers. They put these sliders like it's gonna matter much, but if you're just introducing a new app, why does that introvert extrovert matter at all? How is it going to inform your next design steps or your next team activities? The only reason why you want to do personas is so that it does that it represents the users, but it also informs your activities and actions, and everyone on the team are aligned who you're targeting and why and in what capacity. And here I guess goals, need, challenges, frustrations, and while the motivators are great, but they're quite high level as well, and I would argue if easy to use, speed, features, reviews, recommendations, designs are on the different levels. It's almost like apples and oranges, so you need to clear that out as well. So like ease of use, efficiency and speed, let's say time efficiency, features is a way to achieve the ease of use and time efficiency and other gains. And also again, the progress bars are always a question mark, sliders are always a question mark. They don't really mean much. You would want to identify things which are super unique to Mike or super unique to Hester. And another bit what I would question is really, why do you use the icons to represent their social media use? Is it really relevant? Is it competing with them? Because if it's not, does it really just represent their tech savviness or that they're open to those design patterns on those apps? If I would interview you tomorrow and I would see this persona, I would grill you a lot, and like in the best of ways, because I would be like, how are you actually gonna use it? How are you actually gonna use that they're passive or active? And if you wouldn't answer it, I would know that you just created that so it looks good. Exactly not the case and not the need of UX design, and you could do so much more and other bits to understand the users deeply instead of producing those deliverables. And then in ideation, you're displaying user journeys. To help ideation, user journeys were created. So this is as is journeys, right? So you would want this is exactly what I wanted to have in before. So it's based on your research. You are actually showcasing the as is emotional state, the journeys we take. You map out the experience as is before you ideate. So it really shouldn't be part of ideation at all. It should be a result of your research, of the interviews you did, as long as you targeted the right people and you assess it that way. And then you jump into user flows and information architecture, which is great. I'm not gonna go in depth with that because I think you know what you're doing here. But what I would question is really, how did you jump from there, from that research bit immediately into this? Because you outlined some of the bits and the opportunities in those maps and you kind of ideated, but did you work with a team? How did you jump immediately into sitemap? Which of the opportunities did you decide to pursue? Was it all of them? Because you always need to prioritize. In a real life scenarios, in a commercial scenarios, you always would come up with 10 different opportunities. Maybe one of them only is gonna implement it and in one capacity or the other at that. Outlining how did you distill those opportunities to arrive at all the other feature sets and those wireframes and prototypes and things of that nature. You kind of need to connect the dots for me as a hiring manager. And it's super, super important, because if you leave something to an accident, it just looks like you did those activities to outline what you wanted to design in the first place instead of what the research told you, or what did the team come up with the ideation methods, because you would need to consider what's technically possible, what business needs to achieve the goals, and what users desire and what they do need if it's design thinking, human-centered approach, or UX, regardless. But if UX even deeper, you would need to be even more accountable for those different permeations of the insights into the actual solution. Then looking at the wireframes, this is great. I think your UI design skills are strong, and I think then I would presume that you are a UI designer who's trying to learn more about the UX process. And then you tested it and you did some moderated remote studies, which is great. Users were assigned situational tasks and their behavior was observed. Errors were assigned using Jacob-Nielsen scale. The users you used in a testing just the same way you did your research. I didn't note it down before, but you need to be very specific. How did you pick that target audience? You mentioned surveys, interviews, but even before that, did you just want to target everyone and then you came up with a personas, which is not the right way to do so. So I would want to know that you had thought that your user archetypes are the right ones, and then for both user archetypes you talk to enough people to cover both grounds because you came up with 2. And you set the goals, the tasks, which are quite simple. I would also state what was your hypothesis, because for every research effort, be it the first discovery efforts or the user testing, you should highlight what exactly you want to find out of those tasks. And then you did some observations, rainbow chart, which is, I guess, you use that scale to see exactly where the overlaps are, outline the findings, and then you iterated and showcased before and afters, which is exactly what I would want to see, which is great. However, there is still improvements to be made here, because all your findings making it look less clinical, visual look and feel, things of that nature. There is nothing which validates that the service or the app is actually what they needed. Nothing what validates them having it from ethnographic research perspective day to day and using it. It all validates the specific features which you designed. I would think a bit broader. I doubt that people need more apps to do the same things. What they need is better services, and they need better experience to do that. And so you could have gotten a bit more in depth with that to validate it as a whole first, and then validate the specific features as well. You go into style guide, iconography, typography, UI elements, and then the final product which you showcase, and that's about it. You could think about the next steps for it so it doesn't just collect dust, and as well as some of the learnings. So maybe use this review to kind of outline what else you could have done differently. If it's proper UX, you need to definitely go deeper with user research and understanding who you're targeting and why, and then also aligning the activities. Let's say as a consultant in the design thinking space could have done anything, because that's exactly what design thinking would be, immediately capturing different insights and doing it. But also consider that design thinking consultants do so within weeks. They wouldn't spend months. So there's also that. If you spend a few months on this, I would expect you to go deep with UX, and I think you went deep with UI design of it, which looks great. But you can also then in the next case or a next project just apply the hardcore UX skills, go deeper with the user research, and then your stuff, whatever you come up with, is going to be even stronger. And so I hope this is useful for you, Adam, and for everyone else. If you like this video, give a like, subscribe to his channel, leave a comment down below, and on that note, I'll see you next time.